Live. So, good afternoon, everyone. This is a web forum. This is a web forum led by I, International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. The current situation of the human rights in the Philippines and the United Nations report. That's the title of this web web forum. We are already live. So our speaker is Tinay Palabay from Karapatan. She's the Secretary General of Karapatan. And Pastor Joram Kalimutan of iChirp also is here to represent Peter Murphy. Each participant has 10 minutes to speak. So everyone will be muted on the microphone, and only the one who can speak, whose speaker can unmute their microphone. So if after the presentation of Tinay Palabay and Pastor Joram, um, the next topic will be the question and answer. Just raise your hands. There is a button here to raise your hands so that I can unmute your uh, microphone. So let me call first Pastor Reverend Jong Jinwo to open our forum.
Good afternoon, everyone. Long time no see. Yeah. Yeah. Do you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Welcome all of you. I can guess everyone is in difficult situation with the corona pandemic. But I hope everyone is doing well. Today's meeting was organized very urgently because of the severity of the current human rights situation in the Philippines. Thank you so much for participating in the meeting, even though we are in a hurry. Thank you very much to everyone who organized today's meeting, especially Mr. Jat. He's one of the leaders of Kosamako. And thank for Pastor Kim Min-ji of NCK Human Rights Center. And thank you those who are in charge of the precious presentation. The situation in the Philippines is going very hard. The Duterte regime is on the path on dictatorship, like a car with a broken brake. It's a crisis where no one knows how much sacrifice will be made. Let's hope today's meeting will help us understand the situation better and work together to create a way to overcome this crisis. Above all, I would like to offer solidarity and consolation to our comrades who are fighting in the Philippines. The harder the times are, the more we need to work together. The darker the darkness, the closer the dawn came. Let's make hope together. I hope today's meeting will bring together a lot of good opinion so that we can overcome this crisis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pastor. And now we will hear the presentation of our panelist, Tinay Palabay from Karapatan.
Well, a good day to everyone, our kababayans in Korea and our friends likewise. Um, Good day to all. Just yesterday we had a protest party, so to speak. No, it's a protest, form of protest because we have celebrated yesterday the so-called Independence Day of the country. But at the same time, it's in a form of a party, a birthday party to be exact, because we used satire to criticize the recent double standards set by the Philippine government in the context of the COVID pandemic when it was implementing quarantine rules and guidelines here in the Philippines. It may be a lot different from your experience in South Korea than here in the Philippines, but I guess we share many things. We have many things in common in terms of how the COVID pandemic has impacted on the daily lives, especially of our poor fellow men or fellow citizens, both in the Philippines and in Korea. Well, to start off, should I share my slide or will chat help me with it? Okay. So if we go to my slide, so it will be easier for you to see. Okay. So slide 2, please. Can we go to slide 2? I'll be brief, even though it's 16 slides, but I'd just like to emphasize that even with the pandemic, before the pandemic, we have been facing broad spectrum of problems here in the Philippines. No, we are facing one of the worst human rights crises that we have experienced in the past so many decades. No? And especially so after the martial law of former dictator Ferdinand Marcos. So when the pandemic hit the Philippines, it became a reason, or it was used, to further the to further exacerbate or worsen the human rights crisis that we face at present. No, our president has said so many words, in the past few months, but the most notable among them are two statements. One is his shoot them dead order pertaining to he was addressing the police and military. It was on the first day of April. He said to his police and military that those who violate quarantine rules and guidelines should be shot dead. The second statement that he said was by middle of April that he is keen on imposing martial law in the whole of the Philippines, because of the several questions pertaining to the armed conflict here in the country. But the general trend is that the approach of the Philippine government has taken a whole new flavor or aspect, because these are masked as responses to the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, which is really ironic, because it is a public health crisis, but militarist approaches are being used to justify this more repressive policies of government. Next slide po. Slide 3 po. So at present, there are more than 20,000 cases of COVID here in the Philippines, with more than 1,000 deaths. These numbers are really understated, so to speak, because there are many of those who died in hospitals here who haven't received results of their COVID, of their tests. And at the same time, there is dire lack of systematic reporting, and documentation of COVID cases all throughout the country. Next slide, please. So as I was mentioning a while ago, there is, even before the crisis hit, even before the COVID-19 pandemic, there's already our health system, the Philippine health system, public health system, has been in sort of a bind, no, or is in a convulsion, is convulsing already because of the budget cuts faced, particularly in the for public health services such as health and education. No, and this is the reason why when the COVID pandemic hit, it was really um, a hailstorm, no, so to speak, which is why many of our health workers, doctors, specialists have died because of lack of protective equipment. I guess this is the phenomenon all over the world, but here in the Philippines, it becomes so stark because we have we have been exporting, so to speak, no, health workers in so many countries all over the world, no, including in Europe and in the US, as well as in many places in Asia. And we lack medical professionals and health workers here in the Philippines simply because the government is not giving enough priority and funds for public health services. You know? Until now, to this day, the government refuses to conduct free mass testing. They don't. They use so many words or names to say that they have been conducting testing, but at the same time, we don't have the kind of mass testing being done in Korea. You know, here you have to be either near death before you get to be tested. You know, and at high risk of being infected in hospitals, especially the hospitals are congested or overcapacity in many places, especially here in the capital, where the epicenter of the pandemic is. And that is the reason why the militarist policies of the government are taking the predominant approach. No, or it's um, it's the most stark among the policies that it's implementing in addressing the pandemic. Suffice to say, we are not taking care of our people. The government is not taking care of the people in facing this kind of pandemic. There's very little support for our health workers. You can go to the next slide now, chat. And we are facing one of the worst crises, no, affecting our fellow citizens. We are looking at a very high rate of unemployment come June, this June. No? Economists in the country are projecting a 17 to 20% unemployment rate in the country, the highest in so many decades. And if it does that, it has ripple effects on our migrant workers. Many of them are left without work outside the country and in squalid conditions. No, literally there is widespread hunger. No, because most of our workers are informal or daily wage earners, and the impact of the pandemic is so immense that many members of the informal sector, like those transport workers or vendors or sidewalk vendors, are literally begging in the streets right now, no? Asking for food from ordinary citizens because the government is simply not giving them any. No? And if some are given by government, it is sorely inadequate. No? I don't know the exchange rate between the your currency and the Philippines, but it is barely 100 to 120 US dollars aid, one-time aid, no, for many of the displaced workers or affected workers here in the Philippines. And if you are left without any job, then you are left to yourself thinking how you can get money for your family, you know, for your family's needs, such as basic needs such as food and medicine during this time of the lockdown. Next slide. Well, to Next slide po. For your information, we are still under heavy lockdown. No? Means that yes, we are allowed to go out of our homes right now, but there are severe restrictions in terms of going to one place or another. There's no public transport. Mhm. And that is the reason why workers who are 50% of the manpower of some businesses are left to their own means to go to work. Many are walking, you know, miles and miles from their homes just to reach their workplaces. You know, and even those who are taking the bike, who have bought or borrowed bicycles, um, some of them many of them are experiencing precarious conditions in the streets. We don't have bike lanes here in the Philippines, no? Unlike probably in Korea. Here, you can just be run over by the car like a cat, no, or a dog on the street, no, and it's very dangerous for people to go out because simply there's no public transportation. So during the lockdown, there are numerous issues which has worsened the human rights situation. One are the number of arrests of alleged quarantine violators. According to the Philippine National Police, there have been already 193,000 people arrested since March 17 because of alleged violations of quarantine rules. But mind you, those violations are not even in the law, which was enacted, the emergency law that was enacted by the president in last March 17. So these so-called quarantine violators are in fact being illegally arrested, so to speak, because many of them were arrested because they're not wearing face masks when they go out of their homes. Two, they were just loitering in front of their yards, which is really weird, because they're in their own yards. Some of them have experienced worse. There are a couple of teenagers who were brought to dog cages where you put stray dogs, and they were made to they were detained there for how many hours. There were even a couple of kids who were just playing outside their homes, perhaps violating. These are kids, these are children, perhaps violating some of the social or physical distancing rules, but they were put in coffins. Imagine, they were put in coffins to teach them a lesson. The police did that. And there are so many other cases that will make you think, why is the police doing this when these are forms of torture and cruel and inhuman treatment? There are also many arrests in relation to the government's counterinsurgency program. We say it is in relation to the government's counterinsurgency program because these are arrests allegedly in pursuit, when the government is in pursuit of so-called rebels. But those who have been arrested are not armed rebels. They are mostly activists who are working on land rights and environmental issues. These are human rights defenders and community leaders who are defending their ancestral domains. And yet, they're being criminalized. Their work is being criminalized. Their activism is being criminalized continuously by this government, even during the lockdown. And perhaps one of the most dangerously violated rights are rights on freedom of expression. Many have been similarly arrested because of and are facing charges because of the posts that they make on Facebook or Twitter. Posts which are critical of the government's policies in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide po. So I'll be going some of the cases very quickly with you to show the the type of violations that have occurred during the time of the lockdown. One is the arrest of a homeless woman because she allegedly violated and told an officer off when they were arresting her. And for God's sake, she's a homeless woman. She can't go anywhere else. And yet here comes the police who are arresting her because of supposedly violating quarantine rules. Instead of just bringing her to a shelter, or giving her money for a roof over her head. Next slide po. There's another case of 21 residents of an urban poor area here in the capital who were asking for food assistance. But instead of being given the food aid, they were arrested and jailed for 3 days, making them more vulnerable to COVID inside the over-congested jails here in the Philippines. Next slide po. There's also the case of this public school teacher who was arrested and charged with sedition when she posted a criticism on Facebook regarding the local government's lack of response. Next slide. An artist was also arrested because of her post regarding the cases of COVID in her community in Cebu City. Next slide. A colleague of ours, a human rights worker, was illegally arrested on, she's, how old is Nanay Tessie? I think she's 72 years old, no? She was arrested on charges of kidnapping and arson. These are charges which are baseless and malicious charges brought against her. And yet, even at her old age and the frail health, she was arrested 2 days after the lockdown here in the Philippines. Next slide po. And the killings have not stopped, killings of activists and other rights defenders. Peasant leader Nora Apique in Mindanao was killed on the end of March. Next slide po. A dear friend, a relief worker and environmental activist, Jory Porquia, was also murdered on April 30 in Iloilo City, days after he received threats from the police regarding the work that he's doing to providing aid support for the poor families in Iloilo City. Next slide po. And many more relief workers were arrested on May Day. 18 youth and students were arrested in Quezon City. 42 people in Iloilo province, including a lawyer, were arrested when they were conducting an indignation caravan for Jory Porquia. And there was a case also of relief workers in the capital again who were arrested when they were giving food to poor communities in Marikina. Next slide po. And which is the reason why many people have become so vocal regarding so many injustices and issues, especially during the pandemic. When people are being arrested, when they were just helping or giving aid to the poor, that is an injustice by itself. But when people see high government officials violating quarantine rules, the rules that they made, government made, and getting away with it, not charged or being put in jail like the many others, the thousands of others who allegedly violated quarantine rules, that's double injustice already. So when they see a former Senate president, for example, and this has happened, a former Senate president has violated all health protocols when, as a person under monitoring, he went to a person under investigation. He went to a hospital, no, and not declaring himself as a PUI, no, in the hospital, thereby endangering many people in the said hospital. But our Justice Department just said, okay, we should give him compassion. When the overseas Undersecretary of Overseas Filipino Workers Welfare called out and brought together many of the quarantined Filipino workers in a certain resort or a quarantine area here in Luzon. So to, probably to make it appear that she's doing something when she's just doing Facebook Live, actually, and posting on Facebook, which is not really hard. Everyone can do that now. No, but just to show that perhaps she's doing something, she gathered some of our quarantined migrant workers and essentially convened a mass gathering. No? But she was not arrested, no? Nor was she reprimanded. No? And more so, especially when the chief of police here in the capital conducted a birthday party. My God, a birthday party. You know? When there is booze, there's beer, there's a band, you know? And more than 200 people were gathered. 200 policemen were gathered. You know? The president just says, "Oh, give him a break. It's his birthday." No, but he violated all the rules that they're supposed to implement. No, so what makes them different from the 193,000 who violated the alleged quarantine rules? There's only one difference. The only difference is that they work at the pleasure of the president. And when you're a presidential ally, you get away scot-free. You don't end up in jail. You know? This is the reason why the recent passage of the anti-terror law here in the Philippines is very dangerous. No, because of those two layers of injustice. No, one, it is an injustice when a law infringes on your right against due process, and your right against warrantless arrest. Under the anti-terror law, you can be arrested. People can be arrested here in the Philippines without a warrant. No, you can be wiretapped even without your knowledge. No, you can be put in jail from 14 days to 24 days without charges. This is what the anti-terror law means. You know? And any form of social critique, whether done on Facebook or whether this is done through, columns or commentaries, may be interpreted by law enforcement officials as forms of terrorism or as acts of terrorism, which is the reason why many free expression advocates here in the Philippines are up in arms over this law. You know? And as of today, we are hearing reports that the law has been signed. I mean, these are rumors, no? Because the president has not made any announcement just yet. But rumors are coming out that the president has signed the law, thereby making the law effective anytime now. So we look at this as a kind of steep descent towards martial rule here in the Philippines. It doesn't even need to be declared martial law. Because of this law, there will be many implications on the right to free expression, on many civil liberties and fundamental freedoms here in the Philippines. So this is the reason why many of us have been engaging with the UN human rights mechanisms. I think Pastor Joram will be talking about that. no? And the ways by which, tama ba, Pastor Joram? will be doing that. And how Korea Chirp and other Chirp formations can play a significant role in the process. But we have been accessing international mechanisms because simply the domestic mechanisms are not working. You know? We have filed many things in the local courts, in the Supreme Court, in appellate courts, in before the Commission on Human Rights, before a mechanism on the peace process, in Congress, in all the venues that you can think of. You know? But these are simply not being, justice is not being served. You know? That is the reason why we're going to international mechanisms and venues, because we see that these international mechanisms can help in laying bare the problems that we face here in the Philippines. And second, it is a way to strengthen international solidarity among individuals and allies who think that any crisis situation, whether it's a war, a civil war, or a pandemic, cannot be made an excuse to violate human rights and people's rights. And we believe that the CHIRP and the migrants in Korea are allies. You are our allies in this emerging problems that we have. And we have always had the great support of the Korean people in combating dictatorships and in taking up human rights issues here in the Philippines since so many decades ago. So we believe that only through our solidarity can we effect real accountability and justice here in the Philippines and elsewhere. So maraming salamat po, and if there are any questions, Pastor Joram will answer them. But I can answer after him. So thank you.
Thank you, Tinay. So our next speaker is Pastor Joram Kalimutan. He will take over for Peter Murphy, who is now, I believe, is in the hospital. I hope he's great. He's good. He's fine. So, Pastor.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm reading the presentation of Peter Murphy because he's now has a medical checkup in Australia, and he asked me to present this paper on his behalf. My topic is about the response of ICHU on the UN High Commission for Human Rights, Ms. Michelle Bachelet. Do you hear me? Okay. This report, issued on June 4, should be celebrated as a genuine victory of our broad campaign over many years to draw the attention of the international community to the terrible repression and poverty in the Philippines, and to mobilize effective international pressure to change the situation. Ms. Bachelet responded to the witnesses and to our submission with care and respect, and her recommendations are a substantial response to the findings she has made. This should be very heartening to the Filipino people, in particular to those in the Philippines who advocate for human rights in a very hostile environment. The report has a sharp focus on the huge number of extrajudicial killings done in the name of the war on drugs, the visiting of homes without warrant, leading to the shootings, the use of a template to record these killings, the recording of the same firearm being used in many alleged cases of the victim resisting police, the operational language of negation and neutralization to signal to police that killing of targets is authorized. The report also focuses on the repression and killings carried out in the name of national security. It states that the Human Security Act, the Cybercrime Protection Act, and subpoena powers, law and laws on seditions are so sweeping that they have inadequate human rights safeguards. The report analyzes the impact of Memorandum Order 32 and Executive Order 70, which, like the war on drugs, presume that individuals whose names are put in the list are guilty and can be harassed, red tagged, threatened, arrested on a pretext, and even killed. The lists are made up of leaders of organizations which advocate for economic and social rights. As well, the report says that it has verified the killing of 208 human rights defenders, journalists, and trade unionists between January 2015 and December 2019, including 30 women. It also highlighted the killing of over 40 legal professionals have been killed since 2015, and the removal of Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno because of her criticism of the war on drugs. The report also takes up the repression of the Lumad schools, the denial of free, prior, and informed consent to indigenous people at the Oceana Gold Mine at the Dipio, Nueva Vizcaya, and the killings of environmental defenders in Mindanao, Negros, the Cordillera, Palawan, and Bataan. President Duterte's personal incitement to violence and hatred, including this many rape jokes and encouragement of sexual assault, was also highlighted as a breach of the prohibition against arbitrary deprivation of life set out in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We must strongly support Ms. Bachelet's recommendation to the international community in Clause 88, which would mandate the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to continue monitoring and documenting the situation of human rights in the Philippines and to regularly report to the Human Rights Council. And in the absence of clear and measurable outcomes from international Philippine processes, consider options for international accountability measures. But we must also ask that the Human Rights Council to consider creating the role of special rapporteur on the human rights situation in the Philippines, and also consider an accountability mechanism under the UN Human Rights Committee, which monitors the implementation of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Our sober assessment of the situation is that the Duterte government will not accept the recommendations in the report at clause 87. And presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said as much as last Saturday, June 6, 2020, to quote, "The Philippine government notes the recommendation made by OHCHR but cannot commit to the full implementation given the faulty conclusion on which they were premised, among them the alleged violations of the right to life, the supposedly arbitrary deprivation of liberty of those involved in drug cases, the alleged violations of the right to health, and the implication the Philippine civic space is being destroyed by the focus given to public order and national security. These reports reflect the 100 unique submission put to it by civil society in the Philippines and from the international community, including the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, as well as ours, the Asia Pacific Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines. We did our work. This report already is a victory. It is already isolating the Duterte administration and placing pressure on those states which give it to so much support: the USA, Canada, Australia, Japan. This report was authorized by a vote of 18 states in favor of 14 against 15 abstentions at the Human Rights Council in July 19. Our next task is to make the number in favor higher and the number against lower, even if that is mainly achieved by shifting states from against to abstention. Over the 12 months since that vote of the Human Rights Council, the human rights situation in the Philippines has become worse, with the mass arrests of trade union leaders, continuing extrajudicial killings of farmers, indigenous, and other community leaders, and intensified street-level repression when the COVID-19 lockdown measures were imposed from mid-March this year. This is correctly described as state of de facto martial law. Of great concern is the May 5 closure of the largest TV and radio broadcast network, ABS-CBN, and the current enactment of changes of the Human Security Act, which would allow warrantless arrest and detention. Hence, our concern that the 44th session of the UNHRC, due to begin on June 19, would adopt the report of Ms. Bachelet on the Philippines and resolve to establish an ongoing mechanism to monitor and expose the human rights situation in the Philippines. Following that session of the Human Rights Council, we need to recalibrate our international campaign to maximize the new ground we have won in this long and painful struggle for people's rights. On behalf of Peter Murphy, the chairperson of the Global Council, International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, thank you very much.
So thank you very much, Pastor Joram Kalimutan. So we will now go to the part where a question and answer. If you have any question to our participants, to the panelists, please raise your hands. So who's the? Oh, okay. So Mr. Shin, I will have a question for. You can talk now.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Tine and Lebron Joram. I have a very simple question, but maybe complicated. As far as I know, Duterte's approval rate is still 85 something early this year, right? And with this support, I think it's possible to oppress all the people's movement. So, 85% is quite high. So, in a sense that he thinks that this NGOs and then civil society is tiny group who can be ignored. So, what do you think? Either Tine or Joram can respond.
Mhm. Perhaps I can go ahead, Yung Min. Thank you. And I guess your question is the most asked question among the diplomats that we've talked to. And indeed, it's a question. It's mind-boggling to them why, for so many years already, I think he's now on his fourth year as president. Duterte continues to receive high any survey results the past 3 months. You know why? Because I think the dam has been broken, so to speak. We were interrogating the survey results even before the pandemic, because how the public opinion is being molded by those kinds of surveys. Are the surveys are the samples enough? What are the allegiances of these survey companies doing the kind of surveys? And have they been talking to communities affected by the drug war? Or have they been talking to people in the rural areas where there's a great problem of landlessness? So interrogating the survey is one, but nonetheless, the situation during the time of the pandemic has been so intense, and the opinions have been so polarized that I think that's the reason why they're not releasing any recent surveys right now, because definitely the tide has been turned. And when I say that, it's not only reflected on social media, but more so on the opinions on the ground, on the common people whom you meet on the ground. They're not. Before, they were afraid to speak out because they'll be bullied by the president supporters, or trolls, which is so many here in the Philippines. Almost 70 million Facebook users are here in the Philippines, and it's really a mayhem online. But one thing, that's the reason why the fact that many people are speaking out right now is a good thing, because they do that even at the threat of being arrested or at the threat of being bullied. So yes, we are challenging the so-called popularity of the president right now, more so right now. And we think it has gone down to really low level, especially because of the government's really sorely inadequate response to the pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Reverend Shin. for the the same as Tinay, because the survey, we think, is it's a part of the Duterte's propaganda machine before the start of his inauguration of his presidency. He already used the social media to condition the mind of the Filipinos who that projected that Duterte has the what you call this the high approval rating compared to other presidents in the Philippines for the previous administration. So it is for me it is what a propaganda machine used by Duterte government, and they channeled a lot of money in conditioning the mind of the Filipino people. And also, there's aside from channeling more money, they also channel a lot of money to these private institutions, and especially among the military, to to create a condition where the Duterte government has high approval rating. As for instance, until today, despite the many billions of pesos allotted by Congress and loan by the Duterte government to be used in responding to the COVID crisis, there are still many millions of Filipinos who did not receive economic aids, who our health services are still far below the international standard. I suspect that the funds are being used as bribery to maintain the power to take hold for Duterte to take hold his power as the president, and part of which is to condition the mind of the people that he has still a high approval rating.
One more thing, if I may add also, it doesn't also mean that I guess we're like the US, no, in so many ways. We have a populist president, meaning a president who seems to speak the language of the masses, no? But at the same time, it doesn't mean that he's correct, no? Even if the surveys are true, no, it doesn't mean that killings are correct. It doesn't mean that violating the rights of arrested persons or torturing people is correct. No, it also doesn't mean that not giving aid for people during the time of pandemic is correct. No, so it's very crucial to hold up our government officials to a higher standard, the standards of our own constitutions and the international human rights standards, where they are signatories to these numerous treaties and are bound by their human rights obligations. So it's best that we hold them to account in that pedestal, because these are public officials, no? These are public offices. There should not be any lower standard than what that has been written in our laws and in under the international instruments.
Lebron, Joram, what when this Estrada or Arroyo were in the last stage of their power, what about their approval rate? It was something like 20 or 30s. is
During the approval rating of during the Estrada regime, the what you call this, the crucial part on that is the impeachment trial. When the Senate of the Philippines prohibited the opening of the so-called envelope. And during that time, the Filipino perceived that it is a strong evidence to find Estrada guilty of plunder. So there's the what you call this, a poured out of support in during that time, and the people went to EDSA to oust what you call this, to oust Estrada. And I believe from the experience of Estrada, then to Arroyo, then to Aquino, and then to present Duterte regime, they learn a lot from their experience of Estrada in terms of bribing or giving a lot of resources to the military for the military not to go against the elected president. So I think that's what they learn from the experience of Estrada, and that's why if you see the Duterte government, the Duterte government now has what you call this, a highest degree of military bureaucracy. Imagine even the DSWD as headed by a former military general. Much more the Department of Natural Resources, all the key department of the Philippines is headed by former military general. So so that's what I see during the Estrada, and then to Arroyo, he also learned from this experience of Estrada by controlling again the military, by giving them much favor for military not to go against her.
yeah.
Maybe
Thank
Tina
you.
can add, yeah. Maybe Tina
No,
can
thank
also
you.
add.
Thank you very much for your helpful response. Yeah.
Okay.
So are there any more questions from our participants?
Can I just make
Okay.
one more thing? The South Korean government is a member of the UN Human Rights Council. No? And the sessions, I think, because it has been quite very erratic with the COVID situation and all, it will the 44th Human Rights Council session will be opening on June 29. And the report of the High Commissioner Michelle Bachelet will be delivered on June 30. So we have time to conduct lobby and other forms of advocacy and actions, although in a limited way because of the current health conditions that and social conditions that we have now with the various governments of the UN Human Rights Council. And Korea is an important state that we need to address, because in Asia, when there was this vote last year for high commissioners making of this report, in the whole of Asia, in Asia Pacific, there's only one country who voted for that resolution, and it was PG. All of the other Asia Pacific countries voted against or abstained on the vote because, well, they think that it may hurt the feelings of our president, or it may our president may curse at them, or the governments, or there may be trade relations, no, or considerations. But this is where solidarity can play a big role, because we need to, especially we've asked our friends in so many parts of the world to send letters to their ministers of foreign affairs, to ask them to vote for a resolution that will mandate for an independent investigation on the Philippines, so that there will be a higher accountability mechanism for Duterte before the international community. And any vote that will happen this coming June 2029 onwards at the UN Human Rights Council will certainly impact on the decision of the International Criminal Court, where there is a complaint filed on the many cases, the numerous cases of extrajudicial killings here in the Philippines. We hope that the preliminary examination will be concluded by the ICC, enough for it to issue a warrant of arrest by this year against President Duterte. So it is a crucial, this is where the international platforms play a crucial role, in pursuing accountability and justice. We're not saying that we'll not go after Duterte here in the Philippines. Definitely, we will continue to do that, even if martial law will be declared at this hour, or if the anti-terror bill will be enacted or signed into law tomorrow. Definitely, we'll be pushing the envelope, will be crossing the lines here in the Philippines. But when things go wrong, when things are shuttered here, this is where the international community plays a very crucial role. And this is where your voices are very, very important. Your actions are very important.
So, any more question? We still have time because we started late, right? So we still have a couple of time. So if there are any more questions from our participants,
I'm sorry, I have one more. Is it okay?
okay.
Yeah. During the Estrada or Arroyo's time, I think there were a very strong voice from the ecumenical community, including Christian Conference of Asia and World Council of Churches. Of course, other National Council of Churches in Korea. But in this time, I do not see many support from this wider ecumenical community, including World Council of Churches. So is WCC is involved in this advocacy work, particularly for this 44th session in UN Human Rights Session this June?
Well, we visited the WCC, specifically Peter Prove, who's with the international affairs of the WCC. They have a commission on the international affairs. And they've been, we're very grateful for them, to in their work in Geneva in bringing forward these issues. But I guess you're correct, sir. It is important that the other ecumenical communities, such as the NCC in Korea and in the CCA, will try to be more vocal and visible. You know? I don't think I think that they're in support, of these issues and of these initiatives. But of course, many things get drowned out once in a while, no? When statements are being issued, especially in the time of the during this time of online stuff and everything, no? So we encourage ecumenical communities to uh, keep their strong voice, especially towards the coming weeks for the UN Human Rights Council uh, reports. And you're very welcome to help in this regard.
Yeah, that's why it is also a task in the Asia Pacific Coalition for Human Rights of APCHR to also link to other ecumenical institutions in the region. As Tina said, it is very important we link to the NCCK and then other national councils in the region, the NCCA, the NCCI, which is among the priority countries. Indonesia is one of the priority countries. So we should also seek the support from these ecumenical churches to write to their foreign ministers to in support to the human rights situation in the Philippines. And also, it is a continuing effort to get the support of the ecumenical communities.
Okay, so any more questions from our participants?
I have one question.
Unmute first, please.
Yeah, I have another question. So, in the stage of the Duterte regime, even the very progressive political groups and civil society support him. But why Duterte change his mind to offer the push the people and conservatism? Why he changed his mind, Duterte?
Should I answer first? well, well, the support is actually not support in the sense of his overall national policies. At the start, there were initiatives, of the Duterte administration, such as its initiatives on the peace process that has received quite some good feedback, from civil society, and I remember there's also some good feedback regarding his initial policies on mining, but of course when there's enough, months, as months ran, and as the killings list of those who were killed have gone long, uh, it becomes more apparent that it became more apparent that Duterte fears the military and the police more, and he relies on them more than uh, than what he believes is his base of support, which is why we really think that the so-called approval rating is built on a make-believe platform. Because he doesn't need the police or military if he has the support of the people, right? I mean, that's basic in any democracy. You don't need guns if the people support you, if the people will fight like hell to keep you safe as a good leader. But when you use the military and police to go after your critics at first, or even ordinary folks later on, especially during this pandemic, then you can see a desperate growing lead, a more desperate government that has been there ever since he put in military officials in his cabinet and in crucial posts in government. So I think he's acting like any other leader, government leader, who chooses to maintain the status quo uh, and then the world order. So that's why they when they were saying, "Oh, this new normal thing," we think that this has been our new normal since to 2016. So we think that it's high time that we define the new normal of the people. What a new social order should replace this kind of, and it's clearly it's not just a question of changing presidents, because many of our countries have changed presidents all throughout our histories. But look at us now. Now, where are we in this pandemic? We are in the same and perhaps deeper rut than we are in right now. It is actually a question. It is actually high time for us to interrogate our world leaders, including Duterte, on why the hell have we come to this point? How the hell did we come to this point when a pandemic hits us and all the vulnerabilities that are being hidden by all these flashy Korean novellas. Here in the Philippines, K-dramas are really big, but it's it's one way by which the crises are being masked, and it's one way by which people forget the most essential things that we should fight for, and the things that we should change. So while this crisis is indeed impacting much on our families, on our lives, it also brings out more fundamental questions for us to answer and more fundamental actions that we need to do.
On my part, the Duterte government started unravel himself as a wolf in a sheep clothing, in a biblical terms. It was started when he was exposed that all he wanted is to capitulate the revolutionary movement in the Philippines led by CPP and NPA during the peace negotiation. At the very point, the Filipino people have this high hope that this president will make will make a difference in terms of pushing for a long and lasting peace, addressing the root causes of armed struggle in the Philippines. Yet, as Tina said, he is more inclined on listening to the military than to those who are working for the for the betterment of the Philippines. So he decided to his program on the the peace process is nothing but to capitulate, and not to solve the root causes. So he started to unravel himself as a tyrant during in this time, and then he is only clinging or depending to the military support, and that's why he is maintaining a so-called popularity to make the military believe that he has still the support of the majority of the people. But the thing is, on the ground, it is different. Because whenever the Duterte government is organizing, so-called, some example, a rally in support to the administration, there are few in numbers compared to the progressive movement. So that's the reason that from being a progressive leader, now he became a tyrant and aspiring to be a new dictator or mimic the late dictator Ferdinand Marcos.
So thank you very much to all the participants who questioned. If there are all also no, there are no more questions, we would like to move to the statement of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines and South Korea chapter before we close. And after that, after the reading of the statement, Reverend Pastor John Jinwo will close the program and announce some announcement. Get some announcement. Okay, I will read the statement. Uh, I Chirp Korea's statement on the current situation of human rights in the Philippines and the United Nations OHCHR report. We, the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, Korea, are disheartened on the current human rights situation in the Philippines that continue even when the pandemic came. Instead of addressing the COVID-19 pandemic, the Duterte government imposes a martial law type government. We demand justice for the victims of inhumane killing and the urgent release of all political prisoners who are all victims of Trump Act charges. We welcome the report of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights on the situation of human rights in the Philippines, announced publicly last June 4, 2020. The report has exposes the heavy-handed program of the Philippine government on combating national security threats, which led to serious human rights abuses. It is a historical document for the Filipino people and for advocates of social justice and human rights around the world. The report of the United Nations officials, Ms. Michelle Bachelet, called for an end to impunity. It called for an end to the killings and human rights abuses for the so-called war on drugs. It called for an end to the attacks against activists and critics. It called for an end to the war against indigenous people, an end to the destruction of Lumad schools and their rights. It called for an end to the attack against the rights of the Filipino peasants and workers. It is worthy to note that the United Nations report is a product of solidarities from all over the world, including rights advocates here in Korea who have fought hard for democracy in our own land. We need it as a duty to support the work of democracy and human rights in the Philippines, the long history of human rights advocacy of churches, NGOs, and individual citizens in our land. The visits to the Philippines over the years, latest of which was to the island of Negros, where we listened to the victims and surviving families of those who were killed. These have all been significant effort that led to us to this day. iChirp Korea, in fact, has directly contributed to this outcome by being one of the authors of the Asia Pacific Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, submitted to the OHCHR last January 2020. The submission was a result of a high-level delegation visit to the Philippines last December 2019, of which we were a part. OHCHR report on the human rights situation in the Philippines is both a triumph and a challenge to us. The Republic of Korea was elected last October 2019 to serve on a council, and we will and will be casting a vote in a in the incoming 44th regular session. If it is going to be a vote for justice and for what is right, that is our challenge. Our government's view is that being elected to this council is a recognition for Korea's effort to protect and promote human rights at home and abroad. Our democratic government has pledged that it will continue its effort to contribute to the promotion of universal human rights and by taking a leading part in discussion on key human rights issues of the international community. With this, we can uh, we can knock on the door of our representatives in the UN Human Rights Council, our foreign ministers, our leaders, to do the right thing for the Philippines, to vote yes on the report. We, the iChurch Korea, will do all level best so that the hard work of Ms. Bachelet office is in coming up with the comprehensive report will lead to an independent international investigation of the human rights in the Philippines. Again, iChurch Korea is one with the Filipino people in their fight for democracy, justice, and peace. Reverend Jong Jinwo, chairperson. So yan, that's the statement of iChurch Korea. So I will now call the chairperson of the iChurch Korea to speak for a closing remark and some announcement for us, Reverend Pastor Jong Jinwo.
Yeah, thank you for everyone. It's time to wrap up the meeting. Thank you to everyone again, especially the excellent presentation. We enjoyed very much, and we can understand many things about this situation. Let's work together to ensure that the opinion from today's meeting are put into the practice. Let's pay our respect to the Filipino peoples who are fighting for democracy and justice, and promise to meet again soon as possible. May God bless you. Bye-bye.
So thank you very much to all the participants. Thank you very much for your time. And sa lahat, to all who watch us, to our live, thank you very much and good night.
Thank you very much. Salamat po.